All right. So to start off, uh, hello everyone. My name is Alan Best. I am a product manager here on the Oracle database backup and recovery team. So today we have an interesting topic. We're talking about ransomware resiliency, and we're going to add in some tidbits about how our Oracle recovery appliance actually helps you solve some of your ransomware problems and potential cyber attacks. So specifically, we're going to talk about the nature of ransomware attacks and why they're so important these days, the overall impact of ransomware, and then we'll go a little bit more into what we provide from a recovery standpoint, and why that matters when it comes to ransomware defense. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or wait until the end and we'll have a short Q&A. So with that, let's get started. Oh, here we go. So to start, what is ransomware? I think we have to at least address the elephant in the room. Ransomware is a type of malicious attack where attackers encrypt an organization's data and demand payment to restore access. So this is mainly a topic of concern when regarding databases and backups, given that's where companies' most sensitive and critical data lies. Attackers typically tend to steal organizations' information to demand additional payment and not disclosing it to authorities, competitors, or the public. And especially as we're talking about very critical organizations such as the financial industry and growing industries such as energy, um, AI is becoming big as well. A lot of these databases hold not only client information, but just standard information that you definitely want to make sure you're keeping safe and that you're able to have a plan to keep your business up and running and in the worst case. So going off of that, how big of a problem is ransomware? So to start, uh, I did a little bit of research. So according to the ENISA, uh, one of the top actual attacks, threat landscapes include ransomware and threats against data. Um, number one being ransomware, because it is such a big topic for concern when it comes to data protection. The criticality of possibly being locked out of your data is so urgent. So I would definitely check out this report. It goes a little bit more details about how important all these actually are when it comes to not only ransomware, but as of number four, threats against data. And this is actually as of September 2024. So this is a very recent report. Uh, Going off of that, it's not just ransomware as we know it. Ransomware is consistently evolving. So ransomware may attack as a result of many attacks or different entry points. Just to name a few: stolen credentials, phishing, SQL injection. I'll talk a little bit about how that actually leads to ransomware a bit, but to give you some stats, we have 85% of breaches exploited a known vulnerability. So it, what happens is that typically you guys know exactly what these issues are, um, and they're pretty open. What happens is that attackers are coming in, they're looking for whatever opening there might be, and using that as leverage to get access to a larger system or database. The average ransomware payment has risen to 220,000, and I've seen a lot of cases where that is the payments become so much more than that. So I think that is a low ball of what the worst case scenario could be. Systems are down an average of 23 days due to ransomware attacks, and this stems from not having a response plan. Having a response plan is critical to being able to have your business still go and work as normal while dealing with a potential attack and how to mitigate that issue. And lastly, a ransomware attack is predicted to occur every 11 seconds. That was back in 2021, according to that article, but that costed over 20 billion in total. So it is a very costly problem to have. And in most recent years, we've had more and more cases where there are planned attacks monetizing on business disruption and the disclosure of confidential data. So these phishing emails, the malware, they're trying to reach your network and access your storage locations, your backups, your databases, and that's to steal your data and hold them as ransom. So to go over a little bit of a life cycle of what a ransomware incident looks like, uh, I, I got this from CertNZ. This actually, I thought it really broke it down very nicely, and it splits it up between three different parts. The first part is that initial access. So these can actually be more minor attacks that overall initially seem less impactful, being that it could just be someone that has nothing to do with any sort of security in your database. This could just be someone in your company that got attacked by phishing. But what happens is once they get into a particular account, now what they do is the consolidation and preparation. That's lateral movement. They're trying to get on your network, trying to figure out what accounts they can also get access to now that they're in the network. Privilege escalation, which is getting access to the actual accounts that do have access to that critical data. They're trying to move around and maneuver from there. And lastly, it ends up being a impact on target. And good examples here are data exfiltration, destroying your backups. It says encrypt data, but I consider re-encrypting your data because after they've already gotten access to it. Um, but that pretty much leads to what our primary focus is today. And to go a little bit deeper into how ransomware attacks work, full end-to-end scope. Uh, and this kind of goes a little bit of what we just talked about. We start off with that initial attack. A hacker seems to start with some sort of a malicious activity, and this is typically just setting up their command and control center. Uh, from there, they're sending out some attack vectors, seeing what can they get access to, giving any sort of weak links in a company overall, or any sort of loophole or hole they can find. And from there, they are doing lateral movement. Once they get access, they're trying to have theft of local domain, network access, privileged credentials, and malware that's spreading through the actual organization. And like I said before, this is all in effort just to get access to what they feel is important, which 9 times out of 10 for a company is your databases. And that leads to data theft. Uh, the goal is to exfiltrate and prepare to publish data for extortion purposes. Um, without a response plan in place, the attacker is in control pretty much, because if they go even further, they can compromise your backups. Um, Ransomware tends to move laterally again. If they see where your backups are, they know that that's the last step of the way. So compromising your backups is also a key for ransomware if you don't have a secure backup in place. And then lastly, ransomware then tends to spread as widely through the organization as possible, getting as access to as many databases as they can, because the more data they have a hold on, the more leverage they have for a ransomware demand. But at Oracle, we have thought a lot about these particular issues and what we can potentially do to mitigate a lot of these issues. And just to name a few of them, strengthen authentication and identity governance with identity and access management. We feature a separation of duties model that basically separates who has access to what. So typically your database administrator would not have the same access that your appliance administrator would have, uh, comparative to your other backup appliances as well, which we'll get a little bit further into. Uh, this really helps in the sense of if someone gets access to a particular account, and let's say they do get access to your database, they won't have the same access to then have access to your recovery appliance and your backups, so you at least know that you can contain the issue, and it can really help for something like this where they do get that initial access. We also have the ability to encrypt the database, and I would also add the recovery appliance and additional backup appliances, and protect with the encryption keys and advanced security with Key Vault. So we do have transparent data encryption and Oracle Key Vault, which can be set throughout the entire lifecycle from the database to the backup appliance, and it makes that data encrypted so that if someone did get access to the network and got access to the actual data itself, without actually having access to the account that had without actually having the keys, that data is pretty much useless. So it provides another barrier for anyone looking to attack your actual database or your backup appliances as well. And lastly, immutable backups, which you can recover up to the last transaction with zero data loss recovery appliance, which is one of our main topics for today in terms of what you can do for recovery. And this pretty much leads to the main topic. I've been splurring out all the issues with ransomware. I've told you what ransomware is, some data on why ransomware is bad, and I don't like talking about problems without talking about the solution. So that pretty much leads to what can you do? So when a ransomware attack does happen, and let's say a successful one does happen, there are typically two effects. You are either denied access to your data, or the hackers may release your confidential data. So your first mitigation is having reliable backups and disaster recovery. Your second mitigation to the next effect is encrypting your data beforehand and securing your keys. And for the purpose of this conversation, because ideally our Oracle databases are already set with transparent data encryption, we're really going to focus more on having that reliable backups, and that pretty much sets us up for our recovery appliance. And another point is you typically have two choices. If a successful ransomware attack does happen, the first is that you can just pay the ransom. So if you pay the ransom, you possibly get your decryption key back, although it is not necessarily guaranteed. Only 8% of businesses that pay their ransom get all of their data back. And on average, about 65% of data is recovered. So if you do say, hey, we'll just take our chances, and if a ransomware attack does happen, we'll just pay the ransom and let it happen. There's no guarantee that you either get any of your data back, if not all of your data back. What does happen is that it allows for follow-on attacks. So you have basically opened up the door for all attackers to look at your organization as a potential source of place to get get money through ransom. And you're basically opening the door for a can of worms for more and more attacks that can happen. And law enforcement can help to an extent, but they may not even be able to recover some of the ransom, if definitely not always all of the ransom. And your other option as well, because we have to note it, is you could also just choose not to pay the ransom. Not all businesses that pay the ransom also recover all their data. About 29% of companies recover less than half of their data. So just because you decide to not pay the ransom, it doesn't also guarantee that you are able to get that data back. And like I said before, if you pay once, you'll be paying again. Repeat attacks are a commonplace. And this basically leads into what you can do, which the worst case scenario is rebuilding your systems from a backup. But in the best case, you have our recovery appliance, which has a cyber resilient uh, full end-to-end solution to be able to recover up to the last second. And that's really what I want to focus on today. So talking about recovery in the context of cyber resilience. Cyber resiliency is the ability of an organization to anticipate, withstand, recover from, and adapt to adverse cyber events while maintaining continuous business operations. We always say for our Oracle databases, we don't just have a standard backup and recovery when talking about the recovery appliance. We provide a full cyber resilient solution, and this pretty much just highlights what that means at a high scale, starting off with uh, fast zero to near zero data loss recovery. You get transaction level protection, and you get a complete backup across your enterprise databases. You also get database integrated anomaly checking. So we have database integrated anomaly checks that can alert if something gets flagged throughout the backup process. We also have proactive validation of recoverability, which includes encrypting your data. That's that end-to-end encryption with our transparent data encryption, as well as our Oracle Key Vault, which will be fluid through the entire lifecycle, all the way from the database to the backups, as well as like I mentioned before, our framework for separation of duties, which limits the exposure for what singular administrator can potentially have access to, and many more management controls as well on top of that. And lastly, we have the ability to have additional ways to back up your data outside of just the standalone backup infrastructure, and that includes our Cyber Vault plus a clean room architecture for minimum business viable application and services, which we'll get into as well. But for now, I really want to highlight our recovery appliance. This here really sums up the highlights of what it does, especially when it comes to protecting from not only ransomware, but just cyber threats in general. So here we have a high level view of the architecture of our zero data loss recovery appliance. So this is what it is in action, and what we are able to provide from a end-to-end ransomware protection. So to start, any databases running on any supported Oracle version on any supported Oracle OS platform can be protected by a centralized appliance. This is designed for enterprise-wide backup and recovery needs. And with that, we have core features such as our zero data loss protection with fast restore. One thing that makes our appliance truly unique is the ability to capture a redo stream. That is basically a change log of each transaction that's happening on the database that is sent directly from the recovery appliance. And that's what provides the real-time protection. And so what happens is the recovery appliance has a record of every transaction that's executed on every database. And on top of that, you also get a very fast data recovery through a dedicated network bandwidth and a fast virtual full restore capability. The next one, we have our anomaly detection. So backups are validated end-to-end from the production database to the appliance, and additional backup locations, including our Cyber Vault, which I'll talk about in a couple slides. We have immutable backup policies. So the backups can be made immutable, which means that they cannot be altered, deleted, or modified within their compliance retention time that is set by you as the user. We also have air-gapped backups. That includes our Cyber Vault, which is an additional configuration which has real-time replication that allows for backups to be synchronized when an air-gapped network is periodically opened via a firewall or switch. And once the backups are synchronized, that network is closed. So that network is dedicated to just that Cyber Vault. And if something happens, such as a physical attack on the actual data center itself, your cyber vault is separate from that and should be able to be contained from that particular account. But yeah, once that network is closed, the replication tasks are queued until the next window. So there are lapses of times where that network isn't open, and that pretty much is what contains that cyber vault from the actual data center. I'll talk about it again in a few slides a little bit more in detail. We have independently uh, managed access and policies. So the recovery appliance features a separation of duty model, which sets each role completely separate from one another. And it's something that I mentioned a couple of times already. But basically, each role is separately defined, and no role can actually cross each other. So each role is completely separate. And if someone were to get access to one role, they would not have access to your entire architecture. And lastly, we do have audit and compliance reporting. So you can use our enterprise manager to do granular database monitoring, and that allows you to see how long the backup can be recovered for, including your recovery window versus your recovery goal, and deeper actual numbers on what your recovery appliance is able to recover to. I do see a hand raised.
I just asked him, Alan, to use the Q&A so we can take that at the end if needed.
Yep, that works. All right. So I'll continue to move forward. All right. Did you know? So the recovery appliance actually inherits the scalability and performance of the underlying Exadata-based hardware platform. So this is actually built on Oracle's maximum security architecture. Again, this shows how much time we have spent making sure this system is security optimized, security focused, security hardened. Some examples include restricting the usage to features when not required, disabling all unnecessary and insecure services unless required for system functionality, integrating security fixes for each release, and providing emergency fixes to address zero-day vulnerabilities. So all this is actually embedded within the actual hardware itself. Um, so it's something that we like to uphold throughout our Oracle platform, um, and comes embedded in the actual hardware, as I said. All right, I know I mentioned it a few times, and I kept saying that we were going to talk about it. Well, here it is. This is our Cyber Vault configuration. So this is a isolated air gap copy of your recovery vault. So as you can see here in the diagram, you first have your data center, and this is equipped with your Oracle databases and the recovery appliance. So what happens here is that you have that incremental forever and real-time backup that is sent to your recovery appliance. And then the recovery appliance then sends a maintained isolated copy of the backup to the vault using that private connection, uh, protected by a firewall or gateway, and that is that network gateway, the air gap that we call it. And because of this process, the data in which gets to the actual vault is very well controlled. The vault is separated from the actual data center, so that's why we see in this diagram the data center vault. Um, and I mentioned this before, but the recovery appliance also uses replication to open and close the data stream only within the open window, which is prescribed by you as the customer. And similar to the recovery appliance, it also has the ability to detect anomalies and has access control to separate access between not only the recovery appliance, but the databases and other appliances that may be included within a particular configuration. So lastly, it also has the ability to fast restore to a clean room. So this basically allows you to take a compromised system offline while continuing business. Um, this is a really good configuration for in the event a ransomware attack does happen. You then have an isolated environment that your data center isn't involved with, that's completely separate, um, and allows you to continue business as usual, uh, which really makes this firewall really great in the case of protecting yourself in advance for any sort of not only ransomware uh, attack, but any sort of cyber threat in general. All right. So an additional configuration that we do have is the archive to cloud. So this is actually a cost-effective, immutable secondary backup storage tier. So the recovery appliance is integrated with the OCI object and archive storage. Um, so this happens actually straight out the box. Um, this is like I said, a cost-effective secondary backup storage tier. All this data is compressed and encrypted as it goes out to that OCI storage. Um, the backups are in standard RMAN format, so they can be fully restorable directly from OCI storage for a new cloud database. Um, so if going to the cloud is your end goal, this can help accelerate your cloud journey. Um, or you can also just use them to restore to any sort of on-premise location. Um, Lastly, it also leverages that Oracle Key Vault for key management, which we generate the key used for encryption with our transparent data encryption. And it also retrieves that key that's needed during the actual restore operation from the cloud itself. So this is also a really great option, as I mentioned, really for that longer retention and compliance backup requirements, or uh, if your goal is to end up in the cloud, this can be a great option as well. And lastly, I do want to highlight side by side our recovery appliance and our recovery service. So our recovery service is our cloud service that utilizes our is not only utilized but is built on top of our recovery appliance, and also provides similar ransomware protection and recovery for cloud services specifically. So you get the same main key features, including ransomware resiliency, similar to the recovery appliance. It offers zero data loss and fast recovery. Uh, it offers continuous data anomaly detection and enforced data encryption. So your data will be encrypted throughout that life cycle. You will be able to protect the backups from attacks. So we have immutable backup policies as well there. There is a logical air gap between the customer and service tenancy that allows you to control the network between the two systems. And then also there's a granular control via the identity and access management. So like we said before with the recovery appliance, that allows you to separate who is who has access to what. Um, Lastly, you also have that cyber recovery to a clean room. So you are able to recover to a newly provisioned tenancy. Um, you would still have that cloud observability, monitoring, and reporting, as well as the database cloud service integrated experience. So it's just a different way to solve somewhat of the same problems, but in cloud fashion. The main difference is that the recovery plans would be served in a service tenancy owned by Oracle, and that would actually be separated from your actual cloud databases as well. All right. With that, we'll go into how can you learn more. Um, we have a number of blogs, a technical brief, product webinars that you can actually access that have up here. Most specifically, I have a blog coming out on ransomware, including some of the similar topics that we talked about today. That is coming out. That will be out soon. So definitely keep an eye out for that. That will be on our blog website as well as the ones you see up here. Um, and lastly, you can also engage with us, and that's via LinkedIn or these office hours. So these office hours are always open for you guys to join uh, on our Axe Tom platform. And we typically have these periodically, and uh, we talk about different Oracle backup and data protection industry topics. Uh, so with that, I'll uh, summarize what we talked about. Number one, ransomware breaches can be devastating. Um, we, we we saw the data points. We saw all the different types of attacks that can lead to you actually getting locked out of your database and potentially having a ransomware payment um, being held. Attacks can be a major problem. So small breaches can lead to uh, very large impacts. Uh, I've shown you through the process of which something as small as a phishing attack can lead to lateral movement and you actually getting locked out of your database and losing access to critical data. So ransomware attacks can be very complex and sophisticated. So you do need to be very database aware and you need a attuned solution to combat and defend against such attacks, which lastly led us to our recovery appliance. We call it the world's best Oracle data protection. It is designed for fast zero data loss recovery, resiliency. And we also have configurations for a cyber vault location. And through all this, there is a deep automated integration with the Oracle databases itself as well. So we provide this level of efficient recoverability. Um, and if you can see on the left there, oracle.com/ZDLRA, you can find more information on the specific product information. Um, and with that, we'll cover any sort of questions uh, that may be needed to answered if there are any questions.
There are a couple of hands we could take at the end though, to talk. So I'll allow Heron.
Okay.
Go ahead, Heron. Do you want to just ask your question? You're still on mute, Heron. Okay. I also have Caesar that's wanting to talk. Go ahead, Caesar. Unmute yourself. Wonder if there's issues with unmuting going on. I've asked them to unmute. Yeah, feel free to use the Q&A. We can post answers as well to questions on the Ask Tom site. Don't cover it here. All right. I don't see any other questions
Yeah.
at this
Me
time,
neither.
Alan.
All right. So with that, I say we conclude. Um, yeah. Say maybe give it a couple seconds just in case there's anyone that comes in late with a question that they're typing out.